What's happening, guys? Paul from Maine Mountain Media, and this is our 1-year review of the Sony FX6. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so today we're going to be talking about my opinions and experiences after 1 year of use with the Sony FX6. It's a fantastic camera, it's been treating us super well, and it has technically only been 11 months, but I'm rounding up. So, give you a little background, we got this one back in May of last year, have been shooting with it in all kinds of conditions through, heat and sun and winter and, below freezing temperatures, rain, sleet, snow, all of that good stuff. And it has stood up to the test of time. Just so you know, we're not actually particularly hard on our gear, so there are probably some pieces and parts of this that aren't as durable as some people might want to, but we'll get into all that a little bit later. So for now, all I can say is this is what it looks like after a year. It's holding up beautifully, and we have been loving it. So, number one, image quality. Obviously the most important thing with any camera, and this one is no slouch. Amazing image quality. We absolutely love it. We generally shoot in 4K. We do shoot XAVC-L, which is the long op format. It just keeps the file sizes a little smaller, but the image quality is fantastic. Dynamic range is definitely a slight increase from our Fujifilms. If you guys remember, we actually didn't have any problems with image quality in the Fujifilms, so we switched for a lot of other reasons, but this particular camera is actually a slight step up. So we've been loving the image quality, and yeah, you will too. So no problems. Number two, size and weight. This camera is famously small, and even more famously, it's lightweight. It is a fantastic camera to be running gun style. It's a great camera to be shooting handheld. It's been an absolute dream to work with. We don't balance this on a gimbal just because we have an FX3, so it makes more sense to run that on a gimbal, but it could easily be used on a gimbal. And in terms of size and weight, if you want to build it out, like maybe you've seen in some of our other videos, it is so modular. It has capability of being built out into a massive camera rig, or you can shoot it in this sort of, I don't call it stripped down, but sort of it's like out of the box format. You put a battery, a lens, a mic, and an SD card in it, and it's ready to rock. And amazing image quality just as is. So fantastic size and weight. Number three, modularity. Just touched on this when I was talking about size and weight, but as you can see, there are just like an unbelievable number of mounting points all over this thing. It's a very sturdy body that you can really confidently attach things to it. And then obviously there's companies like Tilta, which we have for all of our cage and attachment points. So you can get rails underneath it, you can get the rail blocks on the top, and it really can be built out into something much, much bigger and more robust with a lot of confidence. So absolutely tons of freedom. You can even strip it down even more than this, take the top handle off, you could take the side handle off, and it could still be fully functional with just the body and a lens, which is pretty cool. Number four, recording options. So there are a lot of recording options on this, but we generally stick to only a few settings. We generally shoot in the XAVC-L, the long op setting, at the UHD 4K, either in 24 or in 60 frames, depending on what we're shooting. And that's generally where we live. It does shoot really good image quality for if you shoot it at 1080, which is great news because there are a lot of times when we don't want big file sizes, we don't have any interest in cropping, and deliverables plan to be 1080 HD anyway. So that's a nice option to have. And if you shoot 1080, you get to shoot it in Super 35, and you can punch in further with the clear image zoom that we'll be talking about later. So lots of good options. And now with the new firmware 2.0, you can even go all the way up and shoot raw, ProRes RAW out through the HDMI into a Ninja, which is amazing. We haven't really found a need for that on any of our shoots yet, given the dynamic range in the native S-Log 3. We shoot in S-Log 3, S-Gamut 3.Cine, and we have not had any problems with the way that we run that. The only thing I will say about the recording option is it comes out in a file format that we don't love for editing, but we're going to talk about that later, so put a pin in that. Number 5, the EVND, or the Electronic Variable Neutral Density Filter. That is the little filter that slides down in front of the sensor, but behind the lens. It's built into the camera body, and it is unbelievably convenient. It is electronically variable, which means that it can seamlessly and steplessly transition from 2 to 7 or 8 stops, and you can smoothly do that with this dial on the side here, and actually change your settings without ruining your shot completely. And because of that electronic variable ND, you're not using polarizers, so problems that associate with polarizing lenses don't crop up in this use case, which is fantastic. And the advent of Auto ND. Auto ND is such a cool feature that we don't lean on very often, but it is really cool. And because it's pretty smooth and very accurate, it's something that could be utilized in some run and gun scenarios, and it's just a nice feature to have, and it's only available because of the electronic variable ND technology. So we absolutely love that. We do a lot of transitioning in run and gun styles quickly from indoor to outdoor, and being able to have that ND filter just built right into the body is it's invaluable. So we really love that feature. Number 6, button layout. As you can see, this is something that most sort of cinema style cameras are touted for. You know, it's something that you would really value, stepping up from a mirrorless camera, not having to dive into the menus to get to your white balance, to get to your menu settings, to get to your ISO settings, or anything else you might want. We have a single customizable button set up for punching up to our high ISO. We have a single button for menu. We have a single button for the deeper menu. You have a single button to bring up all your audio menus. Just super awesome layout. As some people have talked about, Mark Bone in particular, this is a real issue for him, and I agree completely. Thumbnail. Why thumbnail? That's a super weird button, and the playback features inside of this camera are pathetic. I think, you know, even just being able to scrub through your media is something that you should be able to do. I mean, I obviously don't compare camera playback to, like, you know, the playback on an iPad or a phone or something, but I do think that that's one thing that's particularly weak with the Sony cameras, and that could be improved. Short of that, you know, you've got your manual audio gain dials here. So, you know, whether it's audio, whether it's your ND exposure settings, whether it's your white balance, all that stuff's right here at your fingertips, and it's really laid out in a very good way with the one exception. So love the button layout. And then, of course, can't move on without saying top handle has custom buttons, as well as a dial, a record button, and a joystick, and the zoom rocker, and then all those same features plus one extra custom button on the side handle. Absolutely love all of that. And the rotatable side handle as well. It articulates and clicks into place, very sturdy. Love all those features. So if you're the kind of person like me who likes to shoot all the stock accessories, side handle, top handle, and everything, you have absolutely everything at your fingertips at all times. Love that. Number 7, audio settings. Just sort of touched on that with the buttons, but basically you've got dual XLRs, you've got a built-in mic on the top handle. If you want to take the top handle off, you really lose all of your audio options, which is a shame, but it still gives you a little scratch track through this little mic hole in the side, which is great. So if you need to fly it on a gimbal and you want to be able to sync it up to an external audio recorder in post, it's much easier to do with a scratch track. So they did breach that. I do think, like everyone has said 1,000 times over, a 3.5mm mic jack, or even just a mini adapter that you could just plug into this top port, would be very welcomed by all of us FX6 users. But I love the top handle personally, and I shoot with it all the time, so not a major issue to me. So all of that being said, having the little mic holder on the top here for XLR shotgun, I'm running the Deity S-Mic 2S, which is a nice compact short little shotgun. It doesn't put a lot of stress on the mic holder, and again, I'm pretty gentle with my gear, so that mic holder is not an issue. Put a pin in that. We'll talk about that later. But I just love it. It records 8 tracks of audio in every clip. So what I've done is I've set it up so this is my track 1, track 2 is left blank for my plug-in, like an interview setup where we have like a shotgun mic boomed in overhead or something like that. But sometimes, like if I'm shooting skiing, for example, I'll enable that second track and set it up as a safety track at a much lower audio setting so that I can still get good, you know, little audio of birds chirping and the skis scraping on the snow and people talking. But then say if somebody skis really close to the camera or hoots and hollers and screams and yells, I still have that without clipping, which is a really nice feature. Audio track number 3, I always have to my built-in little top handle mic. And then I have the rest of those generally just run blank, but they could be enabled for any number of reasons. And that's a super nice feature to be having. That's a very weird way to talk. Number 8, low light. This camera has an amazing capability in low light settings. So it is a full frame sensor. It's a 10 megapixel full frame sensor. So these individual photo sites are a pretty large size. They have a great light collecting ability. It's a brand new sensor that they developed in just the last couple of years for this and similar cameras. And it has dual native ISO 800 and ISO 12800. And it is amazing to be able to shoot at ISO 12800 and have a fairly clean shot. Of course, in an ideal setting, you would always be shooting at your absolute base ISO and you would be exposing properly and you wouldn't even need to do any post-production, but that's not the real world. So having that ability to sort of like, if you're shooting an f4 lens and you need to run inside and get a shot really quickly, I have even turned on the high ISO to 12,800, which is 4 stops, and it's been too much. And then I turn on the internal ND filter because it's that clean that you can truly count on it. So great shooting capability in low light. Absolutely love that. Autofocus still works super well in low light scenarios if you like to use autofocus. And yeah, just really nice to be able to shoot that. You can shoot a little underexposed. Sony S-Log2 was always really famous for needing to be shot overexposed, the exposed to the right thing. These new sensors do so much better in low light and do such a better job with your fall off into your shadows that you genuinely can be either properly exposing your shots or even underexposed, and it's still going to be a usable image. Number 9. So just mentioned autofocus. Super nice to have autofocus as an available option on this type of camera. It's not super uncommon to have autofocus on video cameras, but this is more of a interchangeable lens camera. And generally in the past, it's sort of been lagging in the autofocus abilities. But Sony is famous for being sort of on the forefront of autofocus technology, and they put the best into this. Your face and eye auto detect is pretty much bomb proof. And with the new firmware, you now have the full-time touch to focus and tracking enabled. So just awesome feature to have. We do often shoot manual focus on most of our setups, but if you have a native lens or if you have the correct adapter and lens setup, super nice to have that. And in a lot of run and gun scenarios or in sports scenarios, we shoot a lot of skiing for Saddleback Ski Mountain. Super nice to have that as an option, and just kind of knowing you can trust it is nice. It sets your mind at ease when you're out shooting. Number 10. It's the last on the pros list, and it is the clear image zoom. This was something we didn't plan to lean on. This isn't something that we were really aware of. It wasn't something that we got excited about prior to having the camera, and even like in our first weeks or months of having the camera, it wasn't something we really trusted or got into. And over the last year, we have found ourselves using the clear image zoom so much. We're leaning on it way more. We're way more likely to shoot prime lenses, knowing that if your frame needs to be punched in a little bit, you can absolutely do that without any image quality loss. People always ask, do you lose image quality when you use the clear image zoom? Well, to our eyes, the answer is yes, I guess, but not to a point where you or I or the end user would ever really care, depending on how far you push it. So if you are shooting 4K and you just use the 1 to 1.5x, I don't see a difference. Spencer is a little more attuned to those types of details, given that he does most of our color grading and so forth, and he has had no problems working with all that clear image zoom shots. If you shoot in 1080 and you shoot in the Super 35 mode, and then you punch it into 2x from there, you absolutely will see the grain will get a little bit bigger. You will have some image quality loss. But in a pinch, I've used that. I was out with a lens that wasn't quite long enough. I was trying to get a wildlife shot and a bird in flight, and I did punch in all the way, and it looks fine. I think it's a trade-off that you'll have to decide in each use case. But if you're shooting in 4K and you are using the 1.5x crop, it has become unbelievably valuable for us. And one little bonus is that 1.5x crop gets you to essentially a Super 35 field of view, or angle of view. So you can use crop sensor lenses on the full frame camera and still shoot in 4K, which is such a cool little bonus that I don't think enough people are talking about. And given that we came from crop sensor cameras shooting video for several years, super nice to be able to still use, for example, the 18 to 35 Sigma art lens, things like that. So really cool feature, something that people don't talk about as much as I think they should, something you should know about. And if you have an FX6, you should be trying it out. You can use these toggles on the top handle, you can use the toggle on the side handle, and you can also map other buttons to work with that as well. And it even works, everything I just explained also works identically on the FX3. The only problem is you lose some of your autofocus capabilities on the FX3. However, on the FX6, with the firmware 2.0, they fixed all of that. And so now when you use the clear image zoom, you lose no capabilities in the camera, which is just awesome. So definitely a nice little bonus feature that you guys will likely end up using. So that's my top 10 pros. Those are all the things we love about this camera, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are a few things, little shortcomings, flaws, things that either might be fixed in the future or just should have been taken care of in advance, in our opinion. And it starts with number 1 on the cons list, which is absolutely number 1 on the list, and it is, of course, the monitor. The monitor on this camera is okay. It's usable. I shoot with it. I don't feel compelled to replace it, but I do find myself cursing Sony's name all the time because it isn't as good as it could be. I don't know why they've done this. There are other brands out there, Canon, that do an amazing job with their viewfinder monitors, and I just can't for the life of me figure out why they seem to be skimping on the viewfinder and the monitor. Even if they wanted to sell it as a after the fact, additional purchase, a 4-inch version that's just a little brighter and a little sharper with slightly better touch focus capability would just go so far for this camera. I would really value having a better monitor. Why no false colors? It's a professional camera, or so they say in big bold letters on the box. Why not give us professional features? There are obviously a lot of things that are great about it. You can tilt it, swivel it, articulate it very easily. The cable's super rugged. It's got 0 latency when you're using it. They've got a great connection. The touch focus, it is okay. I mean, it's not great, but it's pretty good. You can quickly swivel it with this little knob. You can flip it and mirror it. That's nice. It's got the 3 buttons on the side for peaking and zebras, and one customizable one that brings up your scopes or whatever else you want it to do. It's not the worst monitor in the world, but it's definitely probably the weakest part of this whole camera, and I am surprised that they haven't done a better job. So be aware of that. Number 2 on the cons list, size and weight. Ironically. So we actually, this was on the pros list, but there's kind of 2 sides to the coin. So in order to get this thing built out in a way that is capable of all the things you might want, it starts to become pretty big and bulky. So if you add a really big lens, well, then you need to add a support. If you're gonna add support, you need rails, which means a bigger base plate. If you add the bigger base plate and the rails off the front, it becomes pretty front heavy. All of a sudden, I mean, it doesn't take very long before it's like a 12 or 16 pound camera. And that has its benefits, but it also has its downsides. So I think, again, going back to the monitor thing, if you really want to be able to really see your frame, you're gonna wanna add an external monitor, which makes it very top heavy. And so it just very quickly becomes a very different camera than what it's billed as. And so just be aware that, by the time you're really rigging this thing out and shooting it big time, you won't be shooting the same small little camera that you thought you were buying. Number 3 is the 10 megapixel sensor. obviously you have to give up a lot in order to get that low light capability and to get that, you know, the whatever comes with having a 10 megapixel full frame sensor. One of the things you do give up is resolution and the capacity to shoot higher resolutions than DCI 4K. Obviously, a 10 megapixel sensor is DCI 4K and nothing more. So when you're shooting the UHD 4K, you do have a little bit of extra resolution to be able to punch in. That's what that 1.5x clear image leans on. And that's kind of nice. But certainly, I think in terms of cameras that are super future-proof or depending on your client's deliverable requirements, that can be a little bit of a limitation, something you'll want to keep in mind depending on how long you want to shoot this camera, how many years into the future we're going to be capable of being able to shoot only 4K. You know, there are a lot of cameras out there that are 6K, that are 8K, and obviously they don't necessarily need that type of resolution today, but if this is the type of camera you're hoping to carry into the future with you, definitely keep that in mind and something to consider. Number 4 on the cons list is the gyro data. So this is a super cool feature. Sony said they couldn't get the internal stabilized sensor as well as internal NDs. It's just not something they could build out into a unit this size, which is fine with us. We don't necessarily need IBIS, but to compensate, they created this system where it records the gyroscope data inside of the body, and then you can compensate after the fact using their Catalyst Browse software, which is a super cool idea. The only problem we found is that the lenses that we might use this for, i.e. this one, like a manual focus, unstabilized 50mm lens or something like that, you can't use. It has to have the electronic contacts, so it has to be a lens that speaks to the camera. So either a Sony branded lens or using the correct adapters and other electronic lenses. So essentially photography lenses are the only lenses you can use that gyro data for stabilization. It's not something we don't use the gyro data, but that might be because it's just not a very good system in my opinion. So if it was something they could put in a firmware where you could just like manually enter the focal length of the lens you're shooting with, and then that would allow you to use the gyro data, maybe we would use it. So there you have it. Sony, if you have a new firmware update coming, add that. Number 5 on the cons list is the MXF files that these record at. So MXF files are a little challenging to work with for our workflow. We are Final Cut Pro editors, so ProRes is something we really value. This is a camera I don't really want to attach a Ninja to. I'd really prefer to just shoot internal if I can. It gives me a little bit more flexibility, and it's a little more travel friendly. And as a result, we found ourselves actually just purchasing their Catalyst Prepare software, and every shot we get, we just run through Catalyst Prepare and convert into ProRes after the fact. It's just an extra step in our workflow. It changes file sizes. It makes our backing up process a little slower and clunkier, and it's just one extra step in the process. So if you are a Final Cut editor, or if you just don't have any experience shooting in the MXF wrapper, just look into it, do your research, make sure that you're aware of what the implications are and what the potential pitfalls and side effects are. Number 6. So this is the last on the cons list, and it's not actually a huge problem for us yet, but a lot of people who have been shooting with this camera have had this mic mount, the shotgun microphone mount, fail on them. Personally, I find it's pretty weak in the sense that it doesn't really handle, it doesn't reduce handling noise on the camera very well, things like that. I don't really rely on on-body audio super heavily, and again, I'm not super abusive to my cameras, so it hasn't broken off yet, and I haven't had any like audio that I needed that was ruined by this particular mic holder, but because it's been a problem for a lot of people, I'm aware of it, and you should be too. So if you are the kind of person who abuses your equipment or just uses them heavily, or if you're the kind of person who heavily relies on your on-body audio, like if you're doing a lot of documentary work, just be aware that this is not the best, and you might want to look into other options for microphone holders and the like. All right, guys, that is our list of pros and cons, our sort of experiences and conclusions after 1 year of use with the Sony FX6. I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up down below so we know to make more stuff like this. If you want to see more stuff from us, hit that subscribe button, and we would love to hear from you in the comments section. Pros, cons, give us a shout. So thanks for following. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.